Good day, my name is Nyiko Mutileni and I'll be giving you this talk all the way from Limpopo Province. The proportion of households supplied with electricity is increasing in South Africa. However, firewood still constitutes as the main source of fuel, particularly in poor rural communities. This is due to the prohibitive cost of electrical appliances and electricity. Firewood use in 2010 was estimated to be about 13 million meters cubed of firewood per annum in South Africa. According to Statistics South Africa, in Limpopo province, with a fairly large proportion of its population living in the rural areas, it has the highest consumption of firewood in the country, with 40% of the people in the province relying on firewood for cooking in 2014. This continues to be the key reason for deforestation and soil erosion. Before we go into details, let's take a look at our study site. Because the relationship between Mangombe Nature Reserve, its buffer zone, and the Kawomo communities, it is set the premises of this entire study. So the Kawomo communities, it is found in the Greater Giyani municipality, which is in Limpopo province. It is made of 3 villages, Kawomo 14A, 14B, and 14C, which they all fall under the chief Womo. The people there that are characterized as subsistence agriculturists, they usually most of them, they are dependent on natural resources to meet their everyday basis. Then there's the buffer zone, which is an area of the natural vegetation found between Mangombe Nature Reserve and the Kawomo settlement. The buffer zone forms part of the Kawomo villages and is under the leadership of the Kawomo Traditional Authority. The community uses the buffer zone as an important collection site for natural resources as well as the settlement expansion. The vegetation, it consists of mosaic of woodland communities, which it is dominated by plant species such as the Mopani tree, the Colosperma mopani, Combretum species, and Senegalian grasses, together with a narrow strip of thicket. The study aimed to investigate the availability and pattern of occurrence of firewood species across the buffer zone adjacent to Mangombe Nature Reserve. It was assumed that the community collects firewood that occurs in the buffer zone and that they are likely to collect firewood that is found at the beginning of the buffer zone rather than further on inside the buffer zone. With our assumptions in mind, the objectives of the studies were to undertake a vegetation survey within an area from which firewood is collected, namely the buffer zone, in order to determine the following across the distance interval. Plant species present in the buffer zone that are harvested as firewood by the people of Kawomo, dominant firewood species distribution in terms of frequency and biomass, and the most targeted firewood species. During the vegetation survey, a modified Brand technique was used to record the following parameters: firewood species present, firewood species diameter and height, number of individual species, signs of scarring and composting. Statistical package R was used to facilitate all data analysis, and underrepresented firewood species were eliminated during the analysis. Let me take you through the results of the study. Here we are looking at the list of plant species present in the buffer zones that are harvested as firewood by the Kawomo community. What I find really interesting is the use of plant species previously associated with myths and legends. In the past, the community shied away from utilizing Mondule silvestris as it was believed that burning this wood, it will result in disagreement in a household due to its unpleasant smell. The sudden utilization of this wood, it can be due to a decrease of the population of the desired firewood species in the buffer zone. Hence, Mondule silvestris could represent an alternative firewood resource. Another interesting observation is the collection of tree species listed under the National Forest Act of 1998. The study did not ascertain as to why certain users in the Kaum community collect tree species listed under this act. However, it could be due to the following: the communities are not aware of the National Forest Act nor the protected plant species list. Another reason it can be due to firewood preferences. Firewood preference may be determined by some traditional standards, but largely by the efficiency of the burning of that particular tree. Therefore, the collection of Combretum imberbe for firewood is due to its superior coal production and excellent heat retaining properties, which are ideal for cooking and drying, despite the fact that it is listed as a protected tree under the National Forest Act. Let's look at the firewood species present in the buffer zone in terms of abundance. What the graph is showing us is that there is a variation in the abundance, and the variation of the abundance of the firewood species is not due to other species being more targeted and others being less targeted. The difference is because of the vegetation type. The vegetation type is classified as rugged feld, Mopane feld, and certain species are dominant there. In terms of firewood species distribution in the buffer zone, a Euclidean distance matrix with Watt's minimal variance method was used for the hierarchical cluster analysis. What the analysis showed us is that the population of firewood species is not evenly distributed throughout the buffer zone. The population of species such as Grevia flavescens, Mundula cerevisiae, Sclerocarya beria, Ziziphus mucronatus are declining, while the population of plant species such as Dicosteca cinerea appears to be thriving. The graphs also shows us that the population of Colospermum mopane, which is the dominant plant species in the vegetation, declines in areas where Senegalia nigricens and Dicosteca cinerea populations are dominant. Further on, we can say that the populations of Dicosteria, it seems to be encroaching in areas where Colospermum mopane is not really that well established. In terms of distributions according to the measured distance in the buffer zones, we assume that in the beginning of the buffer zones there will be less species, and further on there will be species. But what we notice is that it doesn't matter which part of the buffer zone you are, there is always a presence or absence. Distance doesn't play an important role. So therefore, the community of Kawomo, they are harvesting throughout the buffer zone, not in a specific zone, and because of this, species such as the Dicosteca cinereas are thriving. Let's look at the firewood species present in the buffer zone in terms of biomass distribution. What I found really interesting about this graph is the population dynamic of Colospermum mopane and that of Sclerocarya beria. The population dynamic of Sclerocarya beria throughout the buffer zone, it shows us that Colospermum mopane is among the most targeted species in the buffer zone. Is being utilized. There are less chances of coming across a matured Colospermum mopane tree, whereas Sclerocarya beria, there is a lot of big trees that are present, but this doesn't mean that it is mostly populated, because as we've seen in previous graphs, the population frequency of this tree is really low. And looking at Diaspora scenario, it is interesting to see that there are big trees. I don't know if the communities are avoiding collecting this plant species, or is it because of bush encroachment? Here, the study has revealed that most of the plant species listed by the Kawomo communities as potential firewood species have evidence of scarring and coppicing that indicates that there was, at some degree, harvesting in the past. The study has revealed that the community do utilize the buffer zone for firewood. Firewood collectors cut down large trees for firewood, and evidence of scarring and coppicing was also noted. Due to firewood collections, most of the firewood species that occur in the buffer zones are small to medium-sized shrubs. Evidence of bush encroachment is seen in large numbers of Dichrostracus scenery presence. In terms of collection patterns, the community collects firewood throughout the buffer zone and do not target a specific area within the buffer zone. It is therefore vital that the Kauru communities are made aware of the impact they have on vegetation and the threat this poses to their livelihood. A simple solution a simple solution to the decreasing biomass and the decline in the number of firewood species individuals in the buffer zone is to allow the period of loss by ceasing firewood collection activities in the buffer zone for over a certain period. However, that solution is not practical as firewood is an ongoing source of fuel to many low-income families and prohibiting the collection of firewood, even for a short period, will significantly impact their livelihood negatively. Studies have cited the establishment of woodlots as a solution to firewood collection. A woodlot project would require land and financial support, and a community such as Gawumu, with intrinsic challenges such as lack of water, electricity, and roads, would struggle to obtain funding to establish a woodlot, as this would not be a priority. A further study is required to determine how much the community extracts in the buffer zone per year and how much wood is required per day as firewood. The result of the study will determine how long the buffer zone will be able to continue to provide firewood material to the community. Thank you for your time.